Hi, welcome to the 6th episode of Kalki Presents My Indian Life by the BBC World Service. I'm Kalki Kikla. Yes, I look a little different today. As you can see, I've cut my hair, but I'm still the same person. I hope you've been listening. This is a podcast about being young and Indian in the 21st century. So if you think there's somebody who might want to listen to us, please do share with as many people as you can. Let us know your stories. Share them with us on social media. This is the video version, but you can also find the audio version. All you need to do is go and download any podcast app or audio streaming app and find us on My Indian Life. All right, let's begin. Just before we start, I want you to know this episode of My Indian Life discusses a really important issue, but a difficult one: child sexual abuse. Home is the safest place for a child. But that is not always the case.
So the first time I was sexually abused, it was at the age of 10.
So what did you do?
I didn't know how to react because this person was somebody I loved, trusted, grew up with. I thought that was love. And I thought if someone loves you, that's what they do.
From the BBC World Service, this is My Indian Life, the podcast about what it means to be young and Indian in the 21st century. I'm Kalki Kikla, bringing you stories of grit and determination about how we deal with some of the issues many of us face day in and day out in our lives as young people in India. Episode 6, The Kids Are Not All Right. Do let me know what you think of our podcast. If wherever you listen to allows you to, please leave comments and rate us. And tweet us at BBC World Service or go to the BBC World Service Facebook page. Use the hashtag MyIndianLife. And please do help us spread the word. Tell everyone you know about My Indian Life and how to find us. We don't shy away from tackling some tough subjects, and that's the case in this episode. You might find it hard to listen to, but it is a very important topic because it tells us what happens when a child's trust is broken by the people who are entrusted with his or her well-being. It is the story of a woman who faced sexual abuse as a child and is now fighting to expose what campaigners call the silent epidemic that child sexual abuse has become in India, with millions of survivors suffering in silence. We also hear a plea for help. An unexpected revelation that's left me thinking how little we know about the people we meet regularly or even work with.
So, I'm a survivor myself. I don't even remember how young I was when I was abused.
Family is above all else. That's what we hear all the time. But close-knit family life in India hides alarming levels of sexual abuse of children. It's not unique to India. It's a global problem, but what sets it apart here are the sheer numbers. According to the latest government crime figures, more than 36,000 children were sexually abused in 2016. And in many cases, the abuser is either a family member or someone known to the child. There are laws in India which protect the identities of survivors of sexual abuse, but all the people we hear from in this podcast have waived their right to remain anonymous and have decided to speak on record. Insia Dariwala is 44. She's a Mumbai-based documentary filmmaker who's campaigning against child sexual abuse. She is also a survivor. The first time she was abused was when she was just 10, too young to even comprehend what was happening to her.
I didn't know how to react because this person was somebody I loved, trusted, grew up with. I thought that was love. And I thought if someone loves you, that's what they do.
Insia does not want to share the details of the abuse or who abused her, but says he was just the first of her many abusers.
I think what happened is I started to believe that, there must be something wrong with me, that I'm attracting this kind of thing. So as I started getting older and understanding that, what's happening to me is wrong, instead of hating those people, I hated myself. So that kind of ruined things for me on many different levels because there were different layers at play.
And one of them was the fact that she had lost an eye when she was 6. She was playing with a boy and they had a fight.
We had a children's run-in and he just went home, got his father was a police constable, got his baton and just hit me in the eye with it. And we were very poor. We could not afford a doctor at that time. So my mother did not really take me to a very typical doctor. She, in fact, took me to one of those babas. I lived in the mountains, and they decided to use garlic in my eye to heal me. And because of that, there was a very definitive result that I had lost my eye. And even there was a surgery done, but they could not save it. I was asked to wear a specs, and they couldn't afford to give me glasses. So I developed a lazy eye syndrome in my left eye. So I had a squint. Here I was, living with a squint, living with the abuse, and very low self-esteem. And that kind of compounded the fact that I was being abused by so many different people. So I grew up thinking that there's something terribly wrong with me. So it was either I felt that was love, or I felt that was hate that was coming to me. And there was no gray area in there.
And at what point did you try to sort of confront the issue or talk about it? You said you spoke to your mom when you were 20. Was that the first time you spoke to anyone about it?
Yeah, and it started actually with another abuse that had happened. I never ever thought that he would ever look at me like that. So when he tried to sexually molest me in a car, I was 17 at that time. And so that was very fresh in my head. And I was narrating this incident to my aunt. And that's when, my mother was there. And I said, well, you know what had happened to me when I was young, when I was just a kid. And that's how we went into it. She then did tell me that she had confronted the person and they had a fight about it and all of that. But I think it was kind of a little too late. The damage was done. What actually helped is that my aunt said that had you told me then, I would have, beaten the crap out of him. And I would definitely do something about it. So today, working on the ground, I realized that fear stops children from, confiding. We think it's our fault. We think that there's something wrong with us and I must have done something that, because it was not happening to my sister, but it happened to me. So it definitely was, me.
Insia says it took her a long time to come to terms with her abuse. She mustered the courage to talk publicly about it only 2 years ago, during an appearance on Stree Shakti, a talk show on Doordarshan.
My mother was sitting there with me watching the show, and I could see her face just kind of, go pale. And she was very sad. And then I went and I hugged her and I said, it's not your fault either, what would you have done? Because you were in a setup where you were struggling. We were really struggling. We lived in a 100 square feet home. My mother was actually the sole bread earner in our family. And 3 children. My brother was deaf and mute. He is deaf and mute. So, she had a lot of pressures of her own. And I think at that point I made peace with her.
Insia has been working for the past 4 years trying to inform and educate children, parents and teachers about child sexual abuse. A huge problem, she says, is the secrecy that surrounds the issue. Most children keep quiet, and even when they do report it, there's mostly disbelief, denial, and cover-up to preserve the family reputation.
I don't think anything has changed. In fact, then it was just about me because I was a kid and I had gone into my own world and, I was trying to make sense of whatever was happening. But today I'm trying to make sense of whatever is happening around me because there is so much happening. I witness so much of it because I work on the ground with these survivors. And yes, there is no structure, there's no system in place which can give kids the confidence to come out and confide in their immediate family members, even to their mothers, to their fathers, or in cases where the fathers are the abusers, they cannot talk to anybody. And this is not something just in the low-income groups. So even in the higher income groups where families are very well educated. In fact, there is more lack of transparency over there because there's a stigma and this social, image that has to be maintained. So nobody wants to admit that it's happening.
Insia narrates a case she came across while conducting a workshop in a school.
There was this very beautiful girl, very young, must be like 4 or 5. She kept reaching out to her groin and she kept tugging on her dress, and you could see the discomfort on her face. And I was talking about good touch and bad touch. And there was a counselor in that room with me. So I looked at the counselor and I said, I need to talk to this child alone, and let's get her after the workshop. And I was shocked when the counselor said that, yeah, Insia, she has been sexually abused. And I was like, okay, so have you guys done anything about it? She said, yeah, it's not just her, it's her sister also. Her sister's a little bit older, like 7 years old, and both the girls are being sexually abused by the driver who gets them to school. And I said, and what are y'all doing about it? And what have the parents done? She said, I have spoken to the mother, and the mother said she's trying to find a replacement for the driver.
Oh,
Yeah. So, I mean, you can imagine what I must have felt. I mean, I had to kind of regain my composure, because at that point I really felt like beating the crap out of somebody. I mean, how can you just, dismiss what is happening to your kids, probably thinking that they will overcome it? I think what people need to understand is that you never get over it. You carry it in different ways, in different aspects of your life, in different relationships, and it's always there. It just sometimes comes, rears its head in a very bad way, and sometimes you're able to control it, but it's always going to be there.
Child abuse is soul destroying. Healing takes years, if it happens at all, and it can have a lasting impact on relationships. Insia says it was perhaps the main reason behind the failure of her first marriage. She's now married to a man who, like her, is a survivor of child abuse. Their relationship, she says, has not been easy. Two survivors trying to navigate life together is tough. There's so much history and baggage.
One day he spotted a lamb who was separate from his mother. The wolf saw his chance and pounced on the lamb.
In 2010, Insia made The Candyman, the award-winning short film that tells the story of a father who regularly rapes his son and gives him a candy after abusing him.
When a boy is abused, it's not looked at as abuse. It's a rite of passage. So
Something he has to go
Yes.
through in order to become a man.
Exactly. He cannot feel pain. So there itself you are desensitizing a part of him, by making him believe. If you think about it, when we are born, boys cry. And boys only cry till the age of 4. Can you believe it? That's the study that is out there. That after the age of 4, boys are not allowed to cry. And you look at it around you and you'll see why. Whenever a boy is crying, the first thing that you hear the mother or anybody saying, why are you crying like a girl? You should not cry. Stop it. When a girl comes out with her story, there is a lot of empathy, a lot of pity. Everybody is wanting to support you. But when a boy comes out, the repercussions are really bad. So they are labeled as gay. I mean, come on. How can a child who's like 5 and 6 even know what gay sex is? Or what sex is, for that matter? But they are told that, oh, you must have liked it. You must have asked for it.
Much of Insia's work in the past few years has centered around male child sexual abuse. But it's less visible in a country where rapes and violent crimes against girls and women routinely make headlines. Insia says if we want to make India safer for its women and girls, it's important to address the issue. Her preliminary research with 160 male survivors suggests that boys with unresolved sexual trauma are more likely to be abusers in later life or inflict violence on women. So last year, she started a petition demanding an in-depth study on male child sexual abuse. And earlier this year, the government commissioned her to carry it out. Insia says she has come across many horror stories in the course of her work, but there's one that she can never forget. It happened soon after she had done a workshop in a school.
They were all listening to my workshop. They were very involved and, very enthusiastic. Like they knew everything what I was saying, very smart. And a month later, I get a call from a mother. and the mother was crying bitterly, and she told me that, ma'am, I did something very wrong to my son. So I said, what happened? She said, I beat him a lot with a belt, and I'm feeling very bad about it.
Insia asked her why she beat him. The mother explained he had told her that he was being sexually abused by another child, so she'd beaten him.
And I said, hang up right now, apologize to your child, and then, we'll talk. And so she went back, and she was still crying. And then she calls me back with the child, and now the child is on the phone. He was actually trying to
How old?
assure. He was 7. He was trying to assure his mother that it's okay that you hit me. It's not your fault. And that, really did a lot of. And I think that's what happens. We do not give our children enough space to be, coming to us and sharing anything, not just about sexual abuse, but anything. We don't give them that infrastructure. And what that child told me later was something that killed me. He said, ma'am, I remembered everything that you told me in class. And that's why I came and told my mother. Because that's what I teach. I teach them to trust their parents. But I had also taught the parents to make sure that you trust your children first and not react the way she had reacted. So the child learned the lesson, but the mother didn't.
Insia breaks down while narrating this incident. This is not an easy conversation for me either. In the past, I've spoken about my own abuse when I was 9. Of course, the repercussions of that being a celebrity was that it was splashed all over the pages of the newspapers. And since I have learned to use it in my work in different ways, but not to divulge in gory details for the press, it isn't an easy conversation for anyone. But I can see that a lot of people want to talk about it, want a safe space where they can ask questions and just be free and not feel like somebody is judging them or placing them as victims. As we take a breather, my colleague Akash, who's been sitting in the studio and listening to our conversations, starts talking about his own experiences and asks Insia for help. He said we could record him for the podcast.
So, I'm a survivor myself. I don't even remember how young I was when I was abused. If I was to put a rough estimation, it would be about between 5 to 7 years. And my abuse went on for a while.
I've been working with Akash for the past few months, but I had no idea about his backstory. And yet I'm not really surprised, considering the scale of abuse here.
All things considered and, all experiences done, I'm also a out and proud homosexual man. But sometimes I can't help myself but wonder that, is my sexuality a result of my abuse? Or was my abuse because of my sexuality? Right? Because I would understand that that's the first sort of intimate experience that happened when I was that young. So then did that lead to that conditioning that led to my sexuality? Also because a lot of my other gay friends, and when we discuss our experiences, a lot of them have been abused as a child. So I've always had this doubt that are they correlated or not?
So Akash, first of all, I'm sorry that you had to go through this, because I know exactly how you have been feeling all this time. And the question that you have asked is a very pertinent one, because we see this a lot in our space. I also know survivors who are homosexuals, and I think it would be wrong to say that, that led them to become homosexuals.
Correct.
So don't maybe associate yourself with the sexual abuse with what you are today, because that will become a very painful journey in your own relationship.
Sure.
I guess I just want to add that, Akash, you're not alone in the sense that it's not only gay people who feel that, their sexuality is a result of their abuse. I think straight people also have this dilemma of, if we enjoy sex, is it because of what happened to us? We constantly feel the need to relate our experience from childhood to now. And I think what's important is to realize that that was an act of violence and without consent. And we need to consciously separate that from what choices we make as adults.
Yeah, like I always say that had this not happened to me, I would not be doing this work today, right? With so much of passion.
Yeah.
Like, see, there are a lot of people who are doing this work, but for me, it's a personal. Like, if I get into a space where I'm seeing, a child being sexually abused, so I will not just look at it very clinically. I come to it with a very different agenda then, and that's our strong points. I'm sure you probably do what you do because of it too. But thank you for sharing your story.
Insia's advice to survivors is to first acknowledge to themselves that it happened and seek help and counseling if necessary. In most people's minds, she says, there's a lot of confusion about what survivors are like. There are lots of stereotypes. To challenge the notion that if you're sexually abused, you're damaged goods, she's written a poem. It doesn't relate directly to her personal experience. It's for all survivors of abuse. She reads it out for me.
To the father who made me a mother, to the molester I call brother, to the neighbor that tells me hush, to the society that wants me to combust, to the teacher, the preacher, the sinner, the saint, the uncle, the cousin, the stranger in the lane, I wanna say, I wanna say, I wanna say, I'm more than my body parts, I'm more than what was lost, I'm more than the isolation, the betrayal, the shame, the innocence lost, oh but not in vain. For I am the love which still beats in my heart. I am glee, scarred and wounded, but you have to see. I'm joy, I'm hope, I'm the journey you're after. I'm the journey after. This is me, this is me, this is me.
Insia has made the journey from being a survivor to a thriver and says that others can do it too. It's important for survivors to understand that you don't need to be in that state forever. You don't need to go through life carrying this heavy baggage. Child sexual abuse, she believes, is a disease that's taken over the society. And we are not doing enough to stop it. She says we should deal with it like we would with a killer disease, perhaps something like polio. India made a concerted effort to eliminate polio. We used celebrities to campaign against it. We used every scientific discovery that was made to fight polio. Why are we not doing the same to curb child sexual abuse? If we can look at this as polio, she says, we might really hit a home run on that. Please remember, if you do need to talk about something that is affecting you, it can help to speak to someone you trust or find a recognized organization that's there to assist. Thank you for listening to Insia's story. I know it was a tough listen, but I think it's a really important issue that we should face up to. This week, I'm coming to you from Mumbai. I'm going to share with you some of the messages we've received since our last episode on BP Dakshayani, the scientist who took India to Mars. Pranava wrote on Facebook, I'm studying to become an engineer myself, and it was so inspiring to hear about her dedication and perseverance. Yogesh said, I studied at IIT Madras and had been a bit lost in all classes and competition here. This episode was extremely inspiring and motivating for me, making me realize that I must learn and work harder and put my knowledge into action for the better. And Anand tweeted that the episode gave him goosebumps and that he's definitely going to make his daughter listen to it. Thanks to everyone who's got in touch and shared your comments and stories with us. Please continue to do so. We're at BBC World Service on Facebook and Twitter. Our hashtag is MyIndianLife. You can also email us at myindianlife@bbc.com. In the next episode of My Indian Life from the BBC World Service, we hear from the man who refuses to be defined by his caste. If you are listening to us on a podcast app, and if there's a subscribe button, do press on it. It's free, and it means you'll get every episode automatically. As a podcast, we rely on recommendations, so please help spread the word. And I've got a recommendation for you. our global news podcast, also from the BBC World Service. It brings you the very best of news coverage from correspondents across the world. The biggest news stories and detailed analysis. Search for Global News Podcast. New editions are available twice a week, Monday to Friday, and once on Saturdays and Sundays. I hope you enjoy it. See you next time.